Mario Rosenstock, welcome to Ireland Unfiltered.
Thank you very much, Dion. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm a big fan of the series, and at the moment I feel a little bit like that girl did in Hannibal Lecter, where she's been thrown down into the dungeon, and you're going to throw me scraps of food every so often.
We might do occasional, depends how long we stay here.
It has a real Hannibal Lecter vibe to it, doesn't it?
That's not exactly what we were looking for.
But very warm and welcoming at the same time.
Good,
Yeah.
good. When I talked to people about you coming on today, one of the things a lot of people said to me was...
Jays, it's not him again.
Well, essentially, yeah. They said, is he coming as himself?
Yeah.
Do you find a difference when you're coming as yourself or when you're bringing characters?
I do, of course. I mean, and sometimes I wonder who myself is, and I'm trying to find out that more and more. Obviously, when you're bringing characters, you're only telling stories, really, and you're using those characters' voices to assist you telling stories. But coming in and doing it as yourself, it's a voyage of exploration for me as well. And I guess like anybody else, I change as myself as I go on. There's happy me, there's grumpy me, there's a curious me, there's all sorts of different Barbies.
And would you say you're getting to, like, is it easier as your career progresses, you get older, to come as yourself?
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the beginning, I would always insist on going on to the Late Late Show or whatever and just doing it completely in character. And I mean, to be honest with you, that gets a bit tiresome for me as well, you know, and people kind of go, you know, what about the person behind all this? And actually, people find that quite interesting as well, to know what's kind of driving that person that does all these characters, or what compels that person to be doing this for so long. And so I'm more comfortable now talking as myself. I used to not like my voice and or the way I looked, or even being myself, but now I'm used to it, so warts and all, I don't mind.
But did it become something that you kind of hid behind, do you think, to a degree, that you could just be these characters?
It did, and I mean, it's really simple to do that, and I mean, it's enjoyable to hide behind characters. You can say things as a character that you can't say as yourself. You can you can lay the blame at a character's shoulders for saying stuff, but no, principally you can hide. And I mean, I started life as an actor in this profession, and I still am an actor, and I regard what I do as more like characterizations than impersonations. And actually, the more I've thought about that, the more I realize all acting is, in a sense, an impersonation. So when you see like some great performance in a film or whatever, and then you ask the actor, well, how did you do that performance? They went, well, I kind of based him on a kind of a postman I knew when I was young. And what they're doing actually is an impression of various different people that they've met over their years, and they're putting those into a collage and they're creating a character. And so what I do is basically a characterization, a dramatic performance. But yeah, no, it's been easy to hide behind those, and fun to hide behind those, especially when you have a big blonde wig on. That's particularly fun. The more unlike you it is, the more fun it is to hide behind.
And would you have any concerns then, like, because you're doing more stuff as yourself?
Yeah.
And would you have any concerns? Peter Sellers, I think, said, like, you know, I've as far as I'm aware, I don't have any personality whatsoever. I think that Sellers was an extreme version of that, but he felt there was nothing apart from the voices he did.
Yeah.
Like, would you, when you're bringing yourself out more, would you have had some concerns about what you're going to reveal?
I still do have concerns that I'm a complete vacuum, Dion, and that there is nothing there. I think in Sellers' case, he was clinically, psychotically ill. So I can understand why he would feel he was a vacuum. I think another person was more interesting about that. It was De Niro. De Niro used to remark that I don't want to be interviewed as myself, because the more people find out about me, the more they'll disbelieve when they see a character. And I thought that was an interesting comment. But no, what I really kind of came to terms with is it's good to chat as yourself, good to find out more about yourself, and nobody really gives a damn at the end of the day. I mean, people, it's all a ruse, it's all a pretension, it's all a mess, and people will either buy into what I'm doing or not. Yeah.
But you talked about being an actor originally, but you come, like, there is a sort of performing gene in your family, isn't there? Like,
I guess so.
Like, your mother was an actress.
She was. She was very funny, actually. She was a sort of an ingenue or a little starlet, and she was like about 19 or 20, and she was from Waterford, but she went over to London, and she went with my father. And they went over to London, and she was kind of mooching around trying to be an actor. She was a lovely looking woman, and I do say that with a degree of bias, but she was beautiful and is beautiful. But she was a kind of an ingenue in London, and she'd bump into all these crazies like Peter O'Toole and Peter Bowles. Remember the guy in Remington Steele? And I remember actually, and all these lascivious kind of London actors. And she wouldn't have a clue what's going on. And I remember actually a great story that she told me that Peter Bowles kind of took her under his wing and took care of her, and prevented her from being, accosted by all these London reprobates. But so that's where I was born, actually, and I seem to remember my father being in Wormwood Scrubs around the time I was I was born. Yeah, I think he got into trouble for boxing somebody.
Okay.
So there's obviously something there latent deep inside me as well, which obviously helps me when I'm projecting Roy Keane. But soon after I was born, a couple of weeks after I was born, brought back to Waterford.
Where did your parents meet?
So my parents met in UCC.
Okay.
And my dad was studying medicine in UCC, and my mother was studying there. And my dad was, it was a strange story because my dad was completely unlike me in a way, in the sense that for all intents and purposes, he was a rich kid.
Okay.
He had been, he was the son of my grandfather, who was from Germany and who became very wealthy in Ireland in the mid-50s in Ireland because he was a doctor. And there's a long story behind him as well. And they met in UCC. I think he was studying medicine, and then they kind of hightailed it out of UCC and started their romance. And I was the firstborn from that over in London. And then my grandfather, then my Waterford grandfather, then said, "Get back over here now from London. You've just had this baby, and start your life over here." So,
but your father's father came from Germany.
That's right.
And he met your grandmother in Jersey.
Yeah, that's right. So my grandfather, I was always terrified. I used to be called Dr. Death in school, Dion, because all my friends in school in Water Park used to think I was a Nazi, because they'd heard this rumor that my grandfather was in the German army. Yeah. And when you're 7 or 8, German army means Nazi. Yeah. So he was in the Wehrmacht, right, which was the German army, and he was a young German doctor. Yeah. So he had been well-educated, middle-class German doctor, and he was stationed to the island of Jersey, where, would you believe, he met my grandmother, who was a nurse from Athenry. Right. Yeah. Now they fell in love. Yeah. And across war-torn Europe, went back to Germany, saw out the war, and basically then later got out of Germany. There's maybe an apocryphal story, which I was passed down to me anyway, that one of the ways he got out of Germany towards the end of the war was by impersonating an American officer. Really? And that he put on supposedly a superb American voice, and all the Germans let him through based on the idea that he was an American citizen. Okay. Not an American officer. So
that gene was handed down to him.
That's what I pick up from it anyway. So back to Limerick, to Kilfinnan they came. He set up his doctor's practice. He became very successful, and my father was one of his children.
And what was his story then? Because he was in Jersey for the war, but did he fight in the war as well? Did he?
Yeah, I guess he was a doctor. Yeah. So he was on the front line for a while.
Did did his friends break his arm or something to stop him?
Well, this is another story. See, when your grandparents or whatever are in a war, you hear all sorts of stories. So his brother was also in the army, and being fairly educated, the story goes that they were going to be posted to Operation Barbarossa, which of course was the ill-fated attempt to open up the Eastern Front and attack the Russians. And my grandfather and his brother, my granduncle, apparently knew that this would be a disaster. So the story goes that apparently they went out, got drunk, and broke each other's arm with medical dictionaries to avoid
medical dictionaries.
Cliche to avoid going to Operation Barbarossa. Right. But a fascinating man. An absolutely fascinating man with a fascinating life story himself.
And if you were called Dr. Death, did he have to sort of rebut and refute the idea that he was part of if he was in the German army, people must have thought that he was part a Nazi, to put it bluntly.
Exactly. He was a German. He was a tall 6'3" blonde German doctor living in Ireland just after the Second World War. Who wasn't going to attract a little bit of attention? Yeah, I'm a doctor. I'm a German accent. I'm German. Well, you must be a Nazi. No, that's where I have to draw the line. I'm not a Nazi. You leave out the Nazi bit. So he wasn't a Nazi, but in fact, he was the antithesis to being a Nazi. He was, he was a peace lover. and he became a well-known kind of witch doctor almost in Ireland. And the story goes again that people used to come far and wide to get treated by him, because apparently not only was he apparently a good diagnostician, but people used to get mysteriously well after seeing him.
Okay.
And we all wondered for years, why was everybody so well after the doctor? They'd see Dr. Rosenstock. And of course, the obvious reason was he would have had access to far superior drugs by post from his old friends back in Germany.
Right, okay.
So they would have been posting him parcels, let's say, of proper paracetamol or stuff like that, and this would have had magical effects on the local rural Irish population, and they go, Jesus, that doctor's great.
And what was his, because in Ireland at that time there was a sort of a sneaking regard for the German side in the war. Like, was he, when you say he was the antithesis of a Nazi, was he vocal in sort of trying to prevent that happening?
Well, he was, Dion, and in actual fact there is a very, very interesting story. I was contacted by a guy from a thing called the Irish History Podcast, and he said, he sent me he said, can I send you a direct message on Twitter? And I went, fine. And he said, I have some very interesting information regarding your father and the Second World War. And I went, here we go. I'm a Nazi. Everything I've feared all my life is coming home to roost. I'm a Nazi. And he went, no, on the contrary, he says, your grandfather was far from a Nazi. And the story goes thus. There was a famous Nazi, and his name was Otto Skorzeny. Now, anybody out there could Google him, and they would find that he was an SS paratrooper, very close to Hitler.
Right.
And he was Hitler's go-to Nazi. I mean, this guy is such a Nazi badass. Even Nazi badasses went, I think we need to up the ante here. Who will we contact? Get Otto Skorzeny. Yeah. So, for example, he was used in such military expeditions as the rescuing of Mussolini after Mussolini had been kidnapped.
Okay.
So Mussolini had been kidnapped during the Second World War, and Hitler went, right, we need to get him back for optics, if nothing else. Contact badass Nazi. So Otto gets his gang together. They paratroop into the place. They get Mussolini out, and Hitler goes, nice one. And Otto did many deals like that.
Right.
After the Second World War, he was released from an internment camp in 1948 with no money, and in a few years became incredibly wealthy and sought residency in, would you believe, Ireland.
Of course.
Now, the story deepens here because, as you say, the Irish weren't exactly, were sort of predisposed to certain Nazis, which is much to our shame in this country. You may remember that De Valera sent his condolences after Hitler was declared dead, and we were neutral in the Second World War. But we seemed to be sympathetic to certain Nazis coming to Ireland to live. And one of them was this guy, Otto Skorzeny,
right,
who it was reported and validated by this guy, the Irish History Podcast, was brought to Ireland to attend a party in Portmarnock Golf Club.
Really?
And this party was attended by the high and mighty of Dublin society. Would you believe, including Charles J. Haughey, TD, and another politician,
fresh from burning the Union Jack outside Trinity College.
Correct, and just newly elected TD. Yeah. Charles J. Haughey, TD, and Paddy Burke, father of Ray Burke.
Right.
So anyway, they shaked a few trees and found this Nazi fell out of the tree anyway, and they gave him tea and coffee, and he talked about finding residency in Ireland. So it turns out that Skorzeny was welcomed open arms by these people in Ireland, and he sought to buy a big house, a Martinstown house in Kildare, and he was looking to get residency. And the Irish government were kind of humming and hawing and going, oh, he's a good guy, he's a warrior, he fought in the war, and we're all soldiers, and things happen in war. Not sort of saying the obvious, he's a Nazi, right, SS. But anyway, one of the people who kicked up about this publicly was my grandfather, who first of all started writing letters to the Irish Times, which we have, and he started saying, Nazi in our midst. I'm a German living in Ireland, and I abhor what happened to Jews and anti-Semitism. And this guy is a Nazi and must be gotten out of Ireland. He then wasn't listened to, and he applied to Oscar Traynor, the then Minister for Justice, fall Minister for Justice, and to have a look at this situation. And he wrote a letter also to Bob Briscoe, who was a well-known Irish Jewish politician.
Ben Briscoe's father.
Ben Briscoe, yeah. And Bob Briscoe was appalled by this, and he brought it to Oscar Traynor, and Oscar Traynor basically went, F off, stay out of it, and for all the Jews out there, I wouldn't be worrying about this man from Germany if I were you. We will carry on our own thing. So basically, there was a kind of a welcoming of this guy, and my grandfather kept up the pressure as much as he could. So at the end of all that, Dion, I was kind of going, oh God, first of all, I'm not a Nazi. But second of all, years and years and years after he died, I became desperately proud of him. Yeah. Because I never really had warmed to him. He was a kind of a cold, Bismarckian kind of character, big, huge moustache, quite aloof. Yeah. I remember when I was first born, he made a trip over from Germany to see his firstborn grandchild. And he came in, and the first thing he said was, he put his head in the cot, felt my head, and went, yeah, fine German head, and went back to Germany, basically. So he was a kind of a cold sort of person.
He had some. He had suffered some tragedy in his life at that stage as well, hadn't he? His son had drowned, isn't that right?
Well, that's right, of course. Yeah, my uncle Michael. Oh, that's a terrible story. I didn't know you knew that, but Michael basically was my uncle, and he was the oldest boy in the family, so he would have been older than my father. And he went to Clongowes, and he died in a school expedition in Glendalough. And it was a really horrific story. He tried to swim across Glendalough and never came back, and he had been a strong swimmer and beautiful painter and an athlete and a lovely guy. And it's only recently, actually, I met somebody from Clongowes, and they said to me, oh, your Uncle Michael. And I went, yeah. And they went, do you know, I don't know if this is a true story, maybe somebody could validate it, but they said, do you know that nobody's allowed to swim on outside trips with the school anymore? And I went, are you serious? I went, yeah, it's all because of Michael. And that story has been passed down through Clongowes. And anybody I've met from Clongowes since have told me that they've all heard about Michael and stuff like that.
Because your grandfather, you say he came to see you from Germany. He'd gone back to Germany.
Yeah, basically his marriage had split up with the raven-haired girl from Athenry that he'd met on Jersey, and their marriage had kind of ended. And he went back to Germany and was practicing medicine over there. So yeah, no, he was kind of an aloof character, but it's kind of bittersweet because years later I can kind of put my head up and go, fair play to you, man. Because
that's an extraordinary position to take, because you're not only you're in this new country and the establishment appear to be welcoming this guy, and you're really putting your head above the parapet. Yeah,
and you are, and he was a pretty successful guy in his own right, and he opened factories down in Limerick. He had horses, and he was a doctor and all this. But it just shows that he had a good moral center ground for himself, and I'm kind of proud of him now. And but it is interesting that people would contact you with those stories, and how much we learn about ourselves as we go through our lives, and how much we can be surprised. So a nice story.
And so when you were born in London, but then you came back to Waterford when you were 2 months old. Something like that. So were your parents came back as well? Both your parents came back at that stage.
That's right.
And you're living with your grandparents.
I was living with my grandparents and them on a farm, and I have kind of an idyllic sort of rural upbringing, lots of cows. Yeah. And I'll never forget. I think I based my Jerry Adams impression on my first encounters with cows, because for years I would just go up to fences in the big cow farm and go, and it was that tone that, and it's after the Jerry Adams, I'm the whole Jerry. So one of the first Jerry Adams sketches I did on the radio was Jerry Adams, Martin McGuinness saying, Jerry, do your impression of a cow. Oh no, Martin, I don't want to do that. Do the cow. Okay. So you pick up different sounds. I mean, my grandmother always sounded like Michael D. Higgins, so she always sounded like that. She always used to listen to BBC Radio 4, and she loved Listen with Mother and Desert Island Discs. And I based my kind of impression of Michael D. Higgins on kind of her. Yeah. And she was a fascinating woman as well. And I really miss her, because I always say that, like, when you're going through your life, you always need. It's always great if you have somebody who is your hero, is your champion. Somebody that goes, you know what, you're great, and no matter what anybody says, you're great and you can do stuff. And she was my champion. She used to love me doing skits, voices, messing, acting. She used to love that, and she used to think and tell me I was great. And She said it so much, I believed her.
So you believe that's the key bit, isn't it?
But that's it. You buy into it.
Yeah.
I mean, she was maniacal about her belief in me.
Okay.
She kept saying, I have something.
Right.
I have something. I have a sparkle. She kept saying, I have a sparkle. You have the sparkle.
And did that sustain you?
Yeah, it did. It sustained me, and it used to drive me into class and want me to do little skits and little, and wanted me to be. But I felt it as well. I felt it when I was on stage. I felt the moment I went on stage, I felt at home. I know it's a cliche, but I felt warm. This is where I belong. And I knew it was what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted people to look at me doing stuff since I was about 5. But I knew I wanted to do it forever from when I was about 14. And it was when I first saw my brother in a school production, and I had been a real tennis jock.
Yeah.
And I'd never really rated the theatre or books even or anything like that. I was, and I went to see him, and it was a kind of a male version of Cinderella, a musical version, 1920s, and he was singing and he was dancing and he looked great and he sounded great. And I looked around the audience and all the girls were looking at him slack-jawed, and I went, right, that's the deal. That's the deal for me.
Yeah.
But apart from the girls and the attention, the moment I kind of did it myself, I just felt completely immersed, wanting to stay there and wanting to do it forever.
And was it taking you away from anything? Because like we had Barry Cogan on the show, and he said that like what he got from acting was this sense that he was lost in that moment and everything kind of made sense at that moment. But Barry was coming from a place where he was, there was an awful lot of tragedy in his life. Were you insecure and looking for something to kind of make you complete, and this was it, or was it just a self-confidence that you were going to bring to something else?
At the beginning it was a self-confidence, and then I think I discovered, like a lot of people, I think nearly everybody, that I'm insecure, that I wanted something to fasten it onto. But as I get older, I've changed my mind again.
Right.
And so what I think now is, I think I'm desperately bored with myself.
Right.
And I desperately want to get away from myself. And I think a lot of actors want to inhabit another person's existence because they are just looking for diversion away from themselves.
Do you get bored easily?
Yeah, but to constantly to live in your own body. This is a bit philosophical now, but to live in your own body, to be obsessed with yourself, to be thinking about yourself, to worried about yourself, it's just so tiring. So just to be somebody else for a while is a release and an escape. So to pretend, which is what acting is, and impressions and everything, to pretend that you're something else and somebody else is a joy. And I found that when I first did it, the first performance I ever did was The Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, and I played Willie Loman, who is a legendary character in American literature, and he was about 63, and he's a deadbeat salesman who's reached the end of the road. And I did it for 4 nights in school, and it's still one of the most remarkable experiences of my life. And I remember on the 4th night they went, well, that's the end, Mario, you did great, and that everybody enjoyed that now at the end. And I went, yeah, well, obviously there's no performance tomorrow. And I know this sounds a little bit lovey-dovey, but I just went backstage, and I sat down on a step. I just bawled my eyes out. And the reason I bawled my eyes out was because I wasn't going to be able to be him again tomorrow. I was going to have to leave him behind and not inhabit his world anymore. I was going to have to be going back and be dreary myself again. And that's what it is. Acting, all of this is an escape from being yourself. God.
But when you say you were at home on stage, like, did you have any doubts? Did you feel you were going to not be able to do it? Or was it, like, were you sure that this was where you were?
Sure.
You were sure?
I didn't know I was good at it. If I would be good at it. But I was sure this is where I belonged. So even if somebody had told me, listen, I think we better break the news to you. You're not very good. I'd go, doesn't mean much to me. I'm still going to do it. So I reckon I still would have done it in any capacity. Amateur dramatics. Any capacity. You probably would have seen me in John Player Tops of the Town or something.
And was your mother, like, if your grandmother was giving you this, belief, was your mother the same? Was your mother, like, keen that you kind of express this as well? I
guess so, and she's from an artistic bent, but we don't have this. We don't have the same. We didn't talk about it as much. And my father either. He's kind of he's more of a reserved character, more detached. And my mum is really proud of what she's seen me do. And she actually loves me being the myself part.
Does she?
Yeah, she loves that. She loves all that.
Yeah.
She thinks, she thinks that's brilliant. But that's because when you're being yourself, you are the truest. You are the truest example of the child she had.
You're her son.
So basically, she's seeing herself.
Yeah.
So it's
she's seeing the son she loves.
She's seeing the son she had and loved. So that's what I think that's coming from.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is.
She's not telling you don't be yourself. That would be more worrying for your mother.
That would be.
But then you went to school in Dublin when you were 14, is that?
Yeah, I went to school. Went to New Park first, which, as some people would know, is Ireland's first comprehensive school, and that was a raucous experience because I came to school from Waterford and I had a duffel coat, a green duffel coat, and a briefcase. Yeah. So I walked into school and it's basically, everybody has nose piercings, earrings, sawn off T-shirts. Yeah. So New Park was like, whoa. Yeah. New Park was just such an experience. Yeah.
But you were outgoing. You could fit in with it quite easy. Or you found it easy to fit in with it.
I guess so. I think I had a curiosity value for them, and I used the new boy in class thing to work for me, because everybody's fascinated with the new boy in class for a little while, and then it wears off. And but no, I found I'm good. I was good at soccer, right, and tennis. Yeah, so I was good at soccer and tennis, so that always buys you friends.
And were you performing? Were you being funny for people? Was that
not really?
No,
not really. I was never really the class clown, but I could always do impressions of people, and I always used impressions of people in a funny way. Actually, I used them as a social modifier not to put too fine a point on it. If I was ever being bullied or felt that some guy was going to bully me, I developed the best impression of them ever and humiliate them. Okay. And if you've ever seen a better example, an ideal way to get somebody back, it's to do a brilliant piss take of them. So a guy is, let's say, having a go at you, 5 other people are there, and you do an impression of them, and everybody then suddenly turns their focus on this guy and starts laughing at him. And the one thing a bully hates is being laughed at. It's their biggest fear, being laughed at. Not even being hit, not being shouted at. It's being laughed at. And like, if you could get people to laugh at somebody, it was your golden weapon. So it was a kind of a secret little tool, I think I remembered. Yeah. But as such, I wasn't a class clown, no.
That wasn't that aspect of your personality. Like, you were doing impressions, you were doing that, but it wasn't really.
No, it wasn't really developed.
It's tennis and football.
Until I went down to boarding school in Cork.
Right. Yeah.
And then I went down to boarding school in Cork, saw my brother in that play. Yeah. And then I fell in love, hormones going crazy, so I fell in love with acting, girls, and kind of ditched the tennis a bit, and kind of started trying to act as much as I could. So I did loads of little comedies and plays, and I was absolutely determined to go to Trinity, because in Trinity you could join this famous society called Players. Yeah. And Players Society was legendary for doing plays, and funnily enough, if you did drama in Trinity, you weren't allowed doing Players. Yeah. So the deal was then I'd have to pick an undergraduate degree. So I picked politics and economics, which has subsequently been interesting later in my life, because I've had to do so many, sketches about politics and stuff like that, and that's been interesting. But no, Players was fantastic, and we had a great crew in Players. We had a wonderful selection. Kathy Belton, the now famous Abbey actress, directed me in my first play. I did about 4 plays with Dominic West. Right, yeah. Do you remember Dominic? Yeah, and Dominic went on to become, McNulty in The Wire and Fred West and all this. Yeah. And he's he was terrific back then as well. He was a terrific stage actor, and kind of everybody knew that he had a chance at doing well. And we did loads of plays together, and there was lots of talent around.
But I knew you a bit back then.
Yeah, you did.
But I think I always remember about you was that you had a kind of a curiosity when you'd have a conversation. Now maybe this is a cliche, but some actors you would meet, or people you would meet, and that would essentially be, what did Brando say? An actor is a guy, if you ain't talking about him, he ain't listening. But you were always curious. I have this memory of you always asking questions. If we had a conversation, you would always be asking questions of the other person, rather than saying, this is what I've been doing. And I'm wondering if, like, as your career developed, if that was something that kind of sustained, developing characters, developing personalities, the fact that you had this curiosity.
I think so. one of the things I always do, I'm always asking why. What is it about this person? Why are they doing what they're doing? What drives them? What makes them tick? So I'm always looking at the motivations behind characters. I'm just a curious person. I'm lucky because I have the ability to be able to ask a stupid question. I think that's one of the issues that people have problems with nowadays in society. We're all getting so much information from so many sources that we get cowed by the amount of information that's potentially in our possession, and actually we're afraid to ask the simplest question. So, for example, I was just talking to Patrick, my producer, a few minutes ago, and I was saying, I was asking him about the health service. I was saying, why can't we make the health service work? And I never hear that question being asked now, because I don't know, right? So people are afraid to ask dumb questions, and I'm luckily I'm not afraid to ask dumb questions, and that's because it's coming from a real place. It's coming from a curious place. But I've tried to pinpoint my curiosity, and I do believe it's the human I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by humans. I'm fascinated by people. I mean, I do that stupid game when I'm waiting for somebody in a cafe and two people walk in and they're together. I wonder what the power relationship is. I wonder who's more dominant, who's less dominant. What relation are they to each other? Do they know each other? Are they related? Like that game that people play when they look at a boy and a girl walking in, going, are they 2 months? Are they a year? Are they getting divorced? And I do that all the time. I just love watching people's faces, listening to tones in people's voice. And that's probably where I get an enjoyment from mimicry. And mimicry is sometimes derided in, for example, artistic terms. And mimicry is one of the most purest forms of human study that you can get. I mean, if you like, even looking at any of the actors, and Steve Cogan, for example, and all these people, they are just unbelievable mimics. And that's what they are. They are mimics.
But that's an interesting idea, because even Cogan seems to be slightly, I wouldn't say go as far as say ashamed, but he seems to always been trying to lose his reputation as a mimic, or he put it behind him as quickly as he could. Yet when you watch something like The Trip, and he's so magnificent,
I think they've rediscovered their pride in it. I mean, Rob Brydon himself doing various different versions.
I know, and it's wonderful. But do you feel like, was that something you had to shed as you moved careers? This idea that like there is a sort of an ideal, a sort of artistic purity of the actor versus being a kind of a comic or a
like
mimic.
I always hated impressions. I always loved doing them, but I always hated the idea of it. I always thought that acting is the thing, characterizations are the thing, and that part of a tool of an actor's arsenal is to be able to do impressions of basically anybody. You should be able to do an English accent, an American accent. You should be able to do a decent impression of Sean Connery doing Bond. We should all be able to do these things, but that's only small stuff. But as I've grown older, I've realized it's all the same. It is all the same stuff. We're dipping into the same stuff the whole time. I mean, when you watch, I don't know, Rami Malek doing Bohemian Rhapsody, you can spin all the bullshit you want about. No. Rami immersed himself in the whole idea of Freddie Mercury and all this. Give me a break. Rami Malek is pretending he's Freddie Mercury. He is doing the best impression of Freddie Mercury, but also putting belief into what he is saying into it. Acting is believing what you're saying. But beyond that, it's character driven, and it's copying characters you've seen or imagine or are actually real, like in this case Freddie Mercury. I mean, you can't say that Rami Malek's performance of Freddie Mercury isn't an impression. It is an impression. It's amazing. It's uncanny. It's surreal. But
do you think people in Ireland or around the world do commercially successful comics or impressionists get the same credit and recognition as an actor who says, I spent 6 months in a sort of a hole somewhere preparing for a role?
You're probably right.
Like, do you feel you don't get the credit?
No. I get more credit than I'm due. I mean, I think...
I don't mean credit as...
No, I think it's all rubbish, to be honest. Right. I think it's all rubbish. I don't think you should be giving an actor a credit for I went 6 months down a hole and learned how to do this. I mean, I've always said, for example, like Daniel Day-Lewis, I've never bought into the whole method thing. I mean, the oldest story in the world is the Dustin Hoffman story with Laurence Olivier. And he's running around Central Park for 3 nights trying to make himself shagged out for the scene, and he walks in and Laurence Olivier says, have you not tried acting? And similarly with Daniel Day-Lewis, you can't tell me that Daniel Day-Lewis would not have been a superb actor if he didn't do the method. The man is clearly gifted.
Yeah.
He is a brilliant actor. He is brilliant to look at. He is a brilliant brain. His intuition is fantastic. His timing is fantastic. He doesn't have to go around on set all day pretending he's Christy Brown to be Christy Brown. But listen, it's his method. But no, we're all given too much credit. For God's sake, it's putting on funny voices and making people laugh. I think where the real nice part of that is giving people happiness in any way.
Yeah.
If you can give people happiness in any way, like I still say, I don't care whatever happens to me. The nicest thing that can ever happen is when we're doing a sketch on the radio and somebody texts in and they go, great sketch, just looked at the person in the car next door to me in the car and they're laughing at the same time as I am.
Yeah.
And there's something that makes me really warm about that. The idea that somewhere you've put something out, it's gone through a loud signal and people at the same time have listened to it and you've brought happiness to it. And that's a really nice thing to do. And that's actually what makes me do it, to want to get that reaction, that you've made people laugh. And again, I would argue any comedian who says, no, it's not about that, it's about the art. Every comedian wants to be loved. Every comedian wants to make people laugh. And every comedian wants to know that they've made people laugh. Yeah. It's bullshit to say otherwise.
But was there a process? You said there about how, that you felt that every actor should do this, but acting was the thing. But you said you were moving away from that as an idea that you wanted to be an actor when you were acting in your 20s.
Oh, it was purely pragmatic, Dion, because basically I was like doing loads of plays. I'd done a play with Dennis Waterman. Jeffrey Bernard is Unwell, which was reviled by the Irish journalists.
Yeah, I saw that in London with Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, that's the legendary production, and I did the other production of later with Dennis Waterman.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
all I remember from it was tequila drinking contests with Dennis Waterman.
Really?
Oh my God!
So you got into character for that one then?
Yeah, he did.
You didn't have a problem there.
Not at all. He did.
Did he?
This man was just legendary.
Right.
I mean, he was just. We were in the Olympia. We were caning tequilas every night. Yeah. And then his kind of girlfriend called Rula Lenska, who used to come over, and he was an on and off thing. And anyway, I was only 25 or 26, absolutely out of my face every night with Dennis Waterman. Yeah. And luckily enough, I had my drinking boots on at the time, so I was well able to keep up with them. But I was acting, and I was acting in the Abbey and in the in theatre, and then Glen Rowe, and I had done a film, ironically with Mia Farrow. And I played a disgraceful Nazi.
Right.
I played the worst Nazi ever.
Really?
The worst Nazi. Right. A guy even worse than Otto Skorzeny.
Right, okay.
Now, the thing about this, Dion, is you will not believe what my Nazi's name was.
Go on.
Do you not know?
No.
Colonel Langer. Colonel Langer. So basically, it was a World War II movie with Mia Farrow, Sam Waterston, he of Capricorn 1 fame, and me, and I had a good role. And I was the nastiest Nazi ever. In fact, I was so bad that the directors of the film, who had a consultant on the movie, who was there in Denmark in 1943, was brought onto the movie. A guy who had gone through it. Yeah. And they brought him onto the movie. And I met him. And he was walking towards me and he went, "Oh no! It's Langer!" It was like post-traumatic stress disorder for this guy. As if one Langer wasn't enough. He now had two Langers and a reborn Langer, a dead Langer that now was born. That was brought to life. So basically, I looked like this guy Langer, and I said, "What's this Langer thing?" And they went, "No, see, Mari, he was an Australian director. Mari, this guy Langer was absolutely awful, but he was kind of a baby-faced Nazi. So when you looked at him, you didn't believe he was capable of the atrocities that he was. But so we want you." And I went, "Oh, great. So what are my lines?" And I'd come into every scene, right? There'd just be like Jews flying around the place, running in place, and I just come into every scene with a riding crop and a leather jacket and go, "Find the Jews, burn the rest." Like great lines, like lines where you just walk away from an exploding building and go, "Find the Jews, burn everything else." Right. It was a little bit of a crap movie. Yeah. I mean, not a crap movie, but more of a kind of a chocolate box, 8 o'clock on Friday evening, Disney family Nazi movie. if you can sort of, if there is such a thing. In America there is. But it was a great working with Mia Farrow.
Yeah.
And again, I broke the cardinal rule. I was told by our advisors, do not mention Woody Allen and do not mention Frank Sinatra. So the first thing I said is, how's Frank Sinatra and Woody Allen? And she went, oh my God, nobody talks to me about that anymore. And I love talking about it. And
right,
well, that's because people have been told not to talk about it. She was adorable.
Yeah.
And she was really nice to me as well. And Sam Waterston was lovely.
But so your career is you were doing quite well.
Okay. No, I wouldn't say well.
No.
I'd pick up a job and, you know, you'd do a job and you'd do Langer or whatever and the phone wouldn't ring for 3 months. And you go, but I was fantastic as Langer. Yeah. And then you'd do a play in the Abbey and you think, I was fantastic, phone wouldn't ring. You might do a commercial on television on RTE where you walk down the stairs of the Aer Lingus craft and your boy coming home. Phone wouldn't stop ringing for 3 months because they liked him and that. You can't figure this game out. It's rubbish. Acting is mad. There is no rhyme, reason, nor rule to it. It's all luck.
Yeah.
Thing is, you've got to have a certain amount of talent, but you've got to be ready to take your chances when, if they ever come. Anyway, I was getting completely sick of this waiting around business, and you know, somebody giving you lines like "find the Jews, burn the rest," and you're there, right? And meanwhile, a radio station was starting in Ireland called Radio Ireland, Radio 0% as they called it. And the legendary Ian Dempsey had been poached from 2FM to come on their breakfast show. And I had been in and out once or twice doing some little voices. And Ian said, what about that guy that does one of those impressions or whatever? Maybe we work, try him. And basically meeting Ian Dempsey changed everything because he was one of the biggest names in Irish radio and still is. And we met, hit it off, and he decided he'd like to work with me for a while. And so that was the greatest break of my life because this radio station went from being nothing to being something. And
did you see it as the greatest break of your life at the time?
No. I saw myself as an actor. This voice business.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I still felt looking down on it. Yeah. And actually, it leads me to another thing because after about 6 months of doing Gift Grub with Ian, it was going really well. And we had no texts. We had no internet. We had no social media, YouTube, no tweet, nothing. This was like 1999. And Ian, the only reason the way Ian would know is he'd be in Tesco or whatever and a lady might come up to him going, oh, I love the Bertie thing. I love that. And somebody else say it as well and a few people might say it. And he goes, I think it's going well. So I kept it going with Ian, and Paul McClune was another key part of that. He was the producer of Ian Dempsey's show. But I still thought it was just I was an actor doing a few silly voices. And then I remember thinking, this is really hard. I might do a really good sketch. And then somebody would go, nice sketch, now tomorrow. I go, tomorrow? You have to do it again. And the pain, absolute devastating realization that you have to do this again tomorrow. And after about a few months, I started getting worn down. I was drinking, burnt out. I started getting really tired. And I said, I can't do this. And the reason I was getting burnt out was I didn't admit what I was becoming. And what I was becoming was, this was becoming my life. I was turning into a guy who writes sketches, performs them, and enjoys them. And I thought I was still an actor. And I kind of had a bit of not a nervous breakdown, but a small moment when I had to just take a couple of weeks off because I was shaking and crying before going on the radio for a while. Because I was too anxious about doing it. And I had to take a couple of weeks off, and then I came back and I started getting more into the idea, no, this is what you do. This is you. And when I owned it and embraced it, and when I went, this is me. This is what I do. I'm Mario. I do these voices. I write. And I put something on the radio for people. And when I embraced that, everything changed.
Right. But is it still a daunting prospect that you begin a week where you think, I've got to write? You know.
It is.
Does that change?
It doesn't change. Radio is a monster, and broadcasting is a monster. As you know, you have to do another Unfiltered next week, and you're going to be going, oh, who can we get? Like, we're running out of guests here. Ireland is a small pool. Oh, not him again.
You've been sitting in on our meetings.
Let me call Mario Rosenstock. He'll do it. He's a bit of a hero. And so it demolishes material. It consumes material at a voracious rate. So what I do is I try to keep one step ahead by just writing loads of ideas that I have down in my phone or my notebook, so that I always know that if I have nothing, I have about 8 things left over that I've thought about that might make the bones. Very like a journalist. Journalist, a features journalist will always go, I don't know what to write this week, but I had these notes for 4 things that I was going to write about at some stage. Maybe now is the time.
Yeah. So do you ever switch off?
No. And I think by being on all the time, I am switched off. So I really enjoy it. So that means I sleep every night like a baby.
Right.
And that's switching off. And I wake up and I'm really looking forward to the day. So I think by watching television, by watching movies, and by playing tennis, I am in a sense switched off. But I'm always thinking about stuff to put on. But for me, it feels like I'm switched off. I don't feel upset by it or too unhappy about it.
And when you're writing, when you're doing character, like what is the motivation? Is it always what's funny, or like do you get angry? Does when you're doing politics, does stuff anger you and you feel you want to express something or do something on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an angry comic.
No.
Right? So, I mean, I've kind of struggled with that a long time, understanding the idea. I mean, I've received some criticism in the past for, being too light and all that. But all the comedy I've really admired has never been angry or brutal. I mean, things like Peter Cook to John Cleese to Will Ferrell, they are all joyfully funny. Yeah, and they're and Peter Sellers. There's no anger. It's all hilarious. It's all funny and joyful and surreal. Yeah. So I love being lightly surreal. I love turning things over and flipping things. I love surprising. But I'm not a campaigning comedian, and I don't feel that kind of. I mean, I as a person, I feel huge anger sometimes.
About what?
Well, I feel huge anger at the things that make us all angry nowadays. Lack of justice, homelessness, the health service, the thing I was just talking to you about a minute ago. Why can't you make it work? But I feel angry even more angry by the inefficiency of it all. What's wrong with you that you can't make it work? Like, for example, I think it all starts going wrong when commentators, comedians, or writers start to see people like Owen Murphy and Simon Harris as actually baddies, as villains. Yeah. They're not villains. They're part of a process that's wrong. They're part of a system that's unfixed and that needs to be fixed. Doing a comic sketch where you make Owen Murphy, let's say, out to be this horrible, terrible person, I don't see the logic in that because he's clearly not a horrible person. And Leo Varadkar is not an evil genius. Yeah. Although if you read some commentators online, legitimate commentators, they would make you feel that these guys have a secret plan to hold us all down, and that there is a motivation at the end of their plan to fulfill their evil genius plan. And I just believe they're part of an inefficient system, which they play to. For example, politics is broken. Yeah. The idea of a politician just being in power to hold on to power the next 4 years is ridiculous. So the political system is broken. The economic system is broken. The longer we go on, the richer people at the top get, and the poorer people at the bottom get. So yeah, it makes you angry, but these are not bad people. Yeah,
but they're not. So you don't feel that there's anything you can do that can kind of change who they are or affect what they do. Like, that's not the role of an impressionist or a comic.
I think, well, first of all, it never changes anything. So to think that it will change anything is stupid. I can't change anything. People have been thinking for years, satire will do this and satire. No, satire doesn't change anything. Yeah. What you can do, in some instances, is prick pomposity. Yeah. You can hold, you can shine a light on people whose egos are out of control. You can maybe check people by holding a mirror up to them and amplifying that, so that more and more people go, oh man, your man is a disgrace. He's ridiculed. Sure, he was on GIF Grub there, and they tore him apart. And then that maybe can create some sort of systemic pressure on that person to maybe draw in their horns, pull down their behaviour, and that would be brilliant. But pricking pomposity is pretty much the best you can hope for. Yeah. Can satire change anything? Donald Trump. That's all I have to say. Yeah. Because if satire was able to do anything, why could, it's just showing you how ineffective It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a fan of Saturday Night Live sometimes and sometimes not. I like Alec Baldwin doing impressions of Donald Trump. Grist to the mill.
Yeah.
Just wires up his base. What good is it going to do? None. If they are angrier than ever, if the satire is so seething and angry, will it make it any better? No.
Yeah.
No. So, satire, an army of satirists, as Michael Moore keeps going on about, is not going to bring Donald Trump down. But yet, it is incredibly important that we're allowed to do it, and that we should do it.
And do you think, people are always going to be able to, or not always, but the willingness to satirize Donald Trump is there, but you think that it's harder to be a satirist, to think I can go for people or I can say what I want to say in the modern world?
Yeah, it is. It is a bit. And it's for the obvious reasons that, even if you pretend we can say whatever we want under the auspices of satire and free speech, clearly now we're living in slightly more restrictive circumstances where people are seeking to take offence at any given moment, and they're seeking to weaponize this offence on social media so that they can get attention for themselves, often attention for themselves, earn points that goes, I'm a virtue signalling good person for pointing this out. And yes, so it is harder.
Do you think it's as
I mean, I do see a possibility. I do see a possibility down the road. I don't think it'll be impossible. I've said this before, but I do see a possibility down the road where somebody brings up the idea of, now, do you think there should be people on the radio doing taking the piss out of these people's voices? Do you think that's a bit over the top now? People taking the piss out of people's voices? No. I don't think that should be allowed. I can see that happening at some stage.
Do you think, like, when you say virtue signaling, that people are actually doing it for that reason, or is there just a momentum now where people feel, like, I don't know if it's as cynical as that, where the people are saying, oh, I'm going to, signal how good a person I am, or whether there is just momentum now where people will just say, I don't like this, and there's a weight of numbers of that creates its own momentum, if you know what I mean. It's not that they're doing it out of any kind of desire to be seen as something, but it creates it becomes its own identity, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, you're mainly talking about social media there. And social media is a binary zero-sum game. There are winners, there are losers, there's black, there's white, there's right and there's wrong. And people seek to position themselves as quickly as possible on one of those sides. And by doing so, they gain ticks from the other members of the team that are on their side going, you're a good boy, good boy, good boy, good girl, well done. And so it's a self-validation kind of thing. But basically, social media has done one of the worst things, which is to reduce the argument to two very blunt extremes, binary extremes.
It's a bit like what you said about being curious and wanting to ask questions. Like saying you don't know, or you don't know how you feel about an issue, doesn't seem to work in that environment.
It doesn't, and this is, I think, is one of the most interesting areas I am interested in exploring, either myself or watching other people, and that's the whole idea of a grey area. The polarization of people now is just more than ever, and the whole idea of the centre, the whole idea of the middle ground, the whole idea of having two opinions at the same time, converse, different opinions, cognitive dissonance, the idea of believing one thing but kind of believing the opposite as well.
Yeah, but
you can't do this in the modern day. And I was thinking that all this binary stuff is just such trash that I think the new kind of rock and roll, if you like, the new place to go is the middle. Funnily enough, the place where people are, I'm not sure about this. I want to find out more. I want to listen, I want to hear, I want to be non-adversarial, and I just want to tease it out. But there's less and less room for that in society. And it's also been propagated by mainstream media. Like, for example, if you listen to, I'm not exclusively, but if you listen to, let's say, RTE Radio or something like Sean O'Rourke, you'll hear all these interviews set up. An interview would be going, well, we are joined now by person A and person B. Person A is for, person B is against. Person A, I'm going to say person B is right. What do you think? And person A go, person B is right. Person B, I'm going to say person A is right. Now you two go at each other like fighting cocks. And they go at each other like fighting cocks like this. And at the end of it, nothing is solved. And they go, well, now we go to a commercial break. So there's no sense that anything is getting figured out here. Basically, it's a show. It's a fight where two gladiators who have opposing views go at each other. And too much of media is like that nowadays. Fights, arguments, A and B, who's right, who's wrong. And it's a match, you know?
And that's why Trump rose in the first place.
It is. And it's MMA on the radio, you know? And so I think there's more interesting areas. And I think that's possibly what you can hear in podcasts as well. That's why people are interested in podcasts as well, because there's a lot of discursive argument on podcasts, and less of the, we have 15 minutes here, who's right, who's wrong, let's bang heads. So you get deeper and deeper in podcasts, and it's more nuanced.
I heard when Dunphy was on your show, you said that you were fascinated by his ability to hold two ideas simultaneously. I'd say probably at least two.
Yeah.
Two diametrically opposed. If you can have more than two diametrically opposed.
Well, Dunphy does the flip-flop, and then sometimes he flip-flops on the flip-flops. And sometimes, sometimes he preempts the flip-flop by flopping before he flips. So that when he flip-flops, you'll go, well, that wasn't the first flip-flop. But I think he's one of the most interesting thinkers in Irish society. Dunphy's hilarious because, I've been out with him once or twice, and it's funny how he reads a room. He'll walk into a room and he'll immediately sort of identify kind of the most important person in the room and go up to them and go, no, you're great. And he kind of he's able to ingratiate himself with enemies very quickly. And but he's a sharp mind. And what I love about Eamon is, for all people say about Dunphy's controversial, he is a thinker. He really is a thinker, and I see him as a public intellectual and a person who really thinks about things and tries to make up his own mind. I think one of the most interesting things he did recently was his position on the abortion referendum, where he flip-flopped within the space of 10 minutes on one programme between yes and no. Because Matt Cooper was there like, right, so Eamon, you're a no. Is that right? Yes, I'm a no. I'm a no. And then 10 minutes later, two pieces of TV talks about it. I'm going back to yes. You minute ago you said you were no. Well, I'm changing my mind, Matt. I mean, literally, it was Platini is a good player, not a great player.
I think he described his own position that night as illogical. I think it was the first time somebody called themselves out for an illogical position.
That's the new rock and roll. I'm calling myself out, baby, before anybody else does. But that is fascinating, because what Eamon was doing there was, I thought Eamon was very brave there. He was articulating what was in a lot of our heads, because a lot of us wrestled with that subject. It wasn't yes or no. It wasn't binary. It was grey areas. For me, anyway. And I think for a lot of people, it was.
I want to talk to you about Roy Keane, because, obviously, one of the names Gift Grub was made on was doing Roy Keane. But again, you brought, like, other people might have looked around and said, right, Roy Keane is a public figure, I want to do him. But you had and have, I think, a fascination with him that went beyond just kind of nailing the impression. Was that a motivation in wanting to do him? Or was it just simply because he was somebody who was there and was worth doing?
It grew. At the beginning, you see, when I started doing him, he wasn't the fascinating public figure that he turned into. When I started doing him, it was 1998, 1999. And it was just as a vehicle that Bertie was a Manchester United supporter, and he went over and met Manchester United, and one of them was Yapstam and Roy Keane, and he took penalties against Manchester United, and he met Roy Keane. And I remember after the next day I came in, and Ian Dempsey, Ian's judgment is great when he hears something. He knows what the audience might like, and he went, that Roy Keane you did was good. And I went, oh, was it? Why? And he went, the little laugh that he does. And I went, what little laugh? And he went, the little ha 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 ha. And I went, what about it? And he went, that was good. And I went, why? And he went, I don't know, it's kind of a cuddliness to him. People see him as kind of a monster. And this kind of underlying cuddliness might be interesting. So we kind of played that up, the idea that this fierce warrior had a kind of a warm side. But it totally grew. And the impression then he became such a huge public figure, a figure of interest. And then by the time Gift Grub was 3 years old, Saipan happened, and I put a sketch out the morning. It was really weird. put a sketch out called World Cup Classroom, in which Mick McCarthy is the classroom teacher, and everybody's coming into class, and Jason is there, and Niall, and everybody's good boy. And Roy is late. And Roy, you're late. So, what's it to you? So, we don't like being late, Roy. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So, Roy, I'm not going to do anything about it. So then, what are you going to do about the classroom? Classroom went, and everybody write an explanation or an essay. Why I'm afraid of the Cameroonians. Roy, stay behind. Right, and that was the end of the sketch. 4 hours later, Roy left Saipan.
Wow.
And we went, my God! And it's not the first time it happened. There have been few freaky gift grub things where it's as if we predicted what was going to happen by accident. But Roy was such a public figure. And then, of course, for us then, he was a central character, and he was so interesting. So interesting. And, but I have divided feelings, myself about him. And and one of the things I think about him is how he's kind of got one over on us, all of us, in a way. I mean, I see him as a fundamentally extremely intelligent, naturally gifted, intelligent person. Just he was born with a he was clever.
Yeah.
And you can hear that in his razor sharp kind of verbiage, the way he's able to respond. I mean, that diatribe that he gave to McCarthy in 2002. I mean, that comes from a person who's thinking a lot and festering, making stuff up in his mind of how he's going to unload, when he's going to unload. But one of the things I think he has one over on us, because Keane, more than anything, gets showbiz.
Yeah,
he is pure showbiz. He's box office. Dunphy identified that years ago, but I saw this interview he did with Kevin Kilban on the BBC. He was promoting Roddy Doyle's autobiography that Roddy Doyle had helped him with. And if anybody out there wants to watch that interview back, it's extraordinary. Keane is this huge Saddam Hussein beard. I think it was a big purple top on him. And at one stage during the interview, he goes, "Do you know, everybody thinks I'm a monster. Everybody thinks I'm a monster. I'm not a monster. I'm not a monster. I'm normal gay. But everybody goes, he's a monster." And you're going, God, the guy is giving a performance to the BBC. To the BBC. He knew it's the BBC. He was given a performance to promote his autobiography, and he was doing full Roy.
I saw him do 2 live shows.
Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I agree with you. I saw him do 2 live shows during that book promotion, both in London, and the way he feeds off an audience was like a performer.
He's a performer.
He came alive. Yeah. It's like what you're talking about on the stage.
Yeah.
The minute he stepped out there, he came alive. And one of the audience was a book tour, or was an audience for his book. They'd come to see Roy, so they were they were on his side. They were a sympathetic audience. The other one was at a book festival, so it was a mixed collection of sports fans. It wasn't necessarily Roy Keane fans. And he had them eating out of the palm of his hand.
And he knows it.
And he knows it.
And his eyes start darting around. And the intelligence, you can see the intelligence flickering. And it's the same intelligence you see in Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park with the velociraptors. I've always seen him as a velociraptor. And the first time, I only shook hands with him once. And it was when I was meeting him. And he went, "Roy Keane." I was all right. And he shook my hand. And he looked with these green eyes, he seemed to me to have. He shook my hands, and it was the hand of a velociraptor. And he was basically briefly sizing up me as prey and wondering how to dispose of me if I got out of hand.
I forgot my question to him once halfway through my question. As I was asking him a question, I completely blanked. And it was the velociraptor. Yeah. It was like, this guy's just nothing to me now. I'll vaporize him in a second.
Yeah. You're not doing your job correctly. You've lost the plot, Fanning. Unfiltered. You don't know what unfiltered is. You're fully filtered. There's no alcohol in that. You're a disgrace to your profession. You're supposed to be asking me questions. You don't even have a question.
That was what his eyes said.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has and the other thing about him is at his peak as well. And even now, he's a tremendous looking character. Yeah, people rarely go on about that. First time Roy Keane was ever remarked upon as he's cute was the Tommy Gorman interview. Yeah. For the first time, women started going, "Oh my God, Roy Keane's hot."
Well, that's why I do believe that was one of the reasons he won that PR battle, because it wasn't just women; everyone was attracted to him. and Mick McCarthy, God bless him, was appearing in grainy images from Japan, and then there was Roy in a hotel room in Manchester.
No, worse. So it's Roy Keane. So it's women. Million people are watching Roy Keane, and then they're going, we now cut to Roy Keane and a Labrador. You're going, who's winning the PR battle? And you're just going, yeah, Teresa, I think I'll take the old dog out for a walk. Doing the PR battle again, Roy, are we? Yeah. Yeah, is he cuddly? Have we flossed his hair up yet? Come on, Trixie. So no, he's a magnetic character. I just think he's been a brilliant character for Gift Grub and for me and Ian and the radio station. The only problem is he's letting his narrative down now slightly.
Yeah.
Roy Keane isn't a number 2.
Yeah.
Roy Keane isn't an assistant. Roy Keane doesn't make tea for people. This is a joke. Roy Keane is an ass-kicking number 1 for a top Premier League club. Yeah. Or even better, Juventus. Yeah. But this narrative he's doing now, it's crap. He's going to be popping out of the cupboards in news Daily Star adverts now soon, he's kind of veering close to it's getting a bit silly.
So one other thing I want to ask you about and how it relates to you on Keane. You're one of the few people I've heard when you talk about Saipan, you mention this idea that he was away from home, he was off drink, and I've heard you talk about that, and that's a theory I subscribe to about Keane in Saipan. And I was wondering, like, why you recognize that, how you identify that, because a lot of people don't see that about Keane in Saipan.
I guess I was just like a lot of people, I was just speculating. I mean, as far as I could see, listen, I don't want to pry too much into somebody's personal life, but it's fairly much on the public record. I mean, Keane has had a pretty torrid time with alcohol, and as a lot of Premier League footballers do. But I think that he got himself into a lot of trouble, as we know from the books and everything. And I think then that after his cruciate ligament injury and then the rehabilitation and then going off alcohol, I mean, you're talking about Roy Keane not on alcohol now, even more stoic Roy Keane. Yeah. And I think that to be sent away with 6 weeks, for 6 or 8 weeks, away from your family in this condition, probably would have tested him to his max in terms of how much am I willing to put up with here? These lads, they're not up to it with me, whatever. And anything about your country, which I of course I believe that he's patriotic, but I think he was tested to the maximum. And I can only imagine, how would you not play for Ireland? It must have been a hardcore tussle within your own psyche. And I can only imagine maybe it had something to do with the fact that, it's hard to give up drink and to struggle with that, and to be so far away from home and out of your routine and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm merely speculating.
Was there anything about that, like you said yourself, like, when you come off, when you do a live show and you're about to go on the road again, we should say, and do a series of gigs, like you've had to find ways of kind of unwinding that aren't going to the bar.
Oh, it's terrifically hard, really hard. I mean, I love... performing is one of the greatest gifts you can be given, especially if it's working for you. So I love describing this actually, because when you're on stage and your adrenaline is fully pumping and it's been unloading since about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, slowly coming into your veins until you're 8 o'clock in the evening and you're like a wolf ready to go on and you're fully primed. And when you're on stage and for a period of hours after stage, you're in this incredible physical state, a physical and mental state of mind. I mean, basically all the blood capillaries are wider, blood is pumping through your veins, your eyesight is better, your hearing is better, your smell is better, you are lupine, you're Wolverine, you're stronger because of all the adrenaline that's pumping through your body. And you feel like $1 million after a performance, and if it goes well, you feel like $1 trillion. And the first thing you want to do is just go nuts and just drink and celebrate, because you have all this excess energy. So you're looking at least 3 o'clock in the morning before you can even contemplate things. But as the years have gone by, instead of boozing my head off, I've had to find different things. And for me, it's Napoleon documentaries. Because it's really, they're hardcore. Your brain is capable of soaking up so much. Books about Napoleon, French history, really hard stuff, because your brain is really able to handle it.
Yeah.
So Kierkegaard, Kant, Proust, these are all good things to be doing, because your brain is like, but I can handle it. So I try to watch Napoleon documentaries.
So that's the way you've kind of
calmed down.
Yeah. But was it something you felt you had to do?
Definitely. It's either that or self-destruct. Sure, everybody will tell you it's the same thing. You are so on fire that you could drink all night, every night. And, obviously that's going to destroy you. And, even I know Dara O'Brien, for example, who he apparently Dara, like, after a gig, he loves having a pint in the bar and talking to punters.
Right.
And he loves talking to punters. He genuinely does. And apparently that's one of his things. And he'll have a few pints to unwind. And he'll have, obviously he has the energy, so he'll be able to soak up all this stuff from the punters, because you're so on.
Yeah. But it's, but as you say, it can be dangerous if you...
Really dangerous. Really, really dangerous. And, but there is nothing like that feeling, because you are fully alive. Fully alive. Whatever life is.
What age are your kids now?
So Dash is 11, and Bellamy, a little girl, is 5.
Okay.
And so she's probably a bit more like me.
And how do you feel you are as a parent?
I do my best.
Yeah.
I love my kids. I do my best. I love playing tennis with him. He loves tennis. And I love the acting side with her. She's very dramatic.
Yeah.
So I get home. I mean, I'm home more than people think.
Yeah.
People have this misconception that you're always on tour. You're not always on tour. On the contrary, you're finished work in town by 2:30 sometimes, and you can kind of come home, and I'm there for the evening, the early evening. So I mean, children give you something to live for. I mean, as I said, you can get quite pissed off with yourself and bored with yourself, and to project your love onto somebody else is the secret to life, really. And
would you send them to boarding school?
I wouldn't think so.
No.
Wouldn't think so. I mean, the reason I had to go to boarding school was because, my family weren't, my mum and dad weren't getting on, and the family were kind of split, so I had to go to boarding school. But I think that the two parents, if possible, are massive for their children's development, way more than a school. So I would love to have a big influence in how they grow up and what they believe and how they treat people.
And you were sent to boarding school because your parents were breaking up.
Yeah.
Did that feel like a punishment to you? Did you understand why you were going?
Oh yeah, I did. I really had no one to live with. Really, I mean, both my parents were. It was kind of it was kind of a rough time in my life. I'm not playing the poor math or anything, but I was about 14 or 15, and basically I wasn't living with my mum, or I wasn't living with my dad. I was kind of living with relations. At one stage, I was living with friends, and
really,
yeah. So I was a bit like a latchkey kid for a while. Yeah. So it was. It was
because they had nowhere. There was nowhere for you to live.
No, they were fighting, and without going into too much detail, they were fighting, and we weren't living with them. My mum, and I wasn't living with my dad. I was living with my uncles for a while, my auntie for a while, and then, but they're not my parents. So yeah, there was a little bit of wandering, shall we say? And I think the decision was made to get myself and my brother down to boarding school to keep us out of trouble, and actually in my case, boarding school was a lifesaver because of the drama I discovered, but also because boarding school is a sink or swim situation, as you probably can imagine. And luckily enough, I was kind of gregarious enough and good at sport at the time as well to kind of get a pass. You need something to give you a pass in boarding school to survive the first rickety waters. And if you're kind of good at something or halfway good at something, it gets you through a little bit. But no, it was yeah. I mean, there's no harm in me saying it, but the family situation was fairly broken. So I don't know what kind of collateral effect that's had on my personality or my work or anything, but I'm sure that it's been some present in some way.
You must wonder though. Like you think about yourself and you think about things like that, you must ask yourself what kind of damage has it.
It's one of the things. I do know that one of the sides of my curiosity is I always thought that everybody had an ideal family. So I always thought that Dion, he has a great dad, he has a great mum. They go home to a fire at night and they give each other presents and they smile and they laugh, and that their life is perfect, and that I'm the only one with a kind of broken up family situation. And now subsequently I've learned that no families are like that. But that's what made me curious as well about people. Kind of going, what is it? What do they have?
Right.
How do they
maintain it?
How do they have it? And what's wrong with me? Or maybe what's wrong with me that I don't have it? Maybe it was a slight self-blame, but you'd be fascinated by people who have this idyllic lifestyle. Yeah. What you think is an idyllic lifestyle, but for them was just normal. And in fact, it wasn't normal. They had their own problems behind closed doors, but I thought I was the only one. And we tend to focus on ourselves, especially when we're that age. Yeah. But it was a bit of a broken situation, yeah.
And was it repaired, like not between your parents, but were your relationships with them repaired?
It wasn't repaired, and I guess my relationships with both of them are difficult.
Are they?
Yeah, they are, and probably less so with my mum, but more so with my dad. And those are some of those situations are unresolved, and I guess you have to come to sort of truth with yourself and kind of go, well, will they ever be resolved? And I suppose we all have those issues going, well, will I ever end up talking to my dad? Will I ever end up squaring with him or whatever? But I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't know.
And is that where it is now? You don't talk to him?
Well, yeah, I guess we don't talk, yeah.
When did you last talk to him?
About 10 years ago.
Really?
In fact, it was the day of the greatest tennis final of all time. So it was Roger Federer versus Rafael Nadal in 2008 in the Wimbledon final. I know it because I remember that now. That was the last time I talked to him. Yeah.
Why did you talk to?
Because at the time we were still in touch. But yeah.
And why did it stop then?
Well, I mean, these are very complex issues, Dion, and I explained that my grandfather was quite an austere, detached person, and I suppose maybe that was passed on to the next generation, and maybe that had a kickback effect on me. Boy, in the psychiatrist's chair here, Dr. Anthony Clare and Dion Fanning. So no, I've turned into Roy Keane. Yes, so my father. Obviously, I vaporised him. But obviously, there's no going back. He's done what he's done.
You've got back now to doing the hiding behind an impression.
No, credit to hiding behind things. Wizard of Oz. If I ever see him again, I'll vaporise him.
But has it affected how you've been as a like when you say about that was handed down to him?
Yes, it has.
But you've gone the opposite way, would you say?
Well, it's mean of me to say that, but in my own small juvenile way, I believe I have. So one of my big determinations was I'm going to try and make sure that what happened, my experience wasn't going to be the same with my kids. So I kind of try to create this not over love, because I don't believe in that either, but just the sense of stability and security that I felt I didn't get. And so I'm really keen on showing, on creating that. So yeah, I'm overcompensating. Right. But I don't want to overcompensate by spoiling them. Yeah. Because I could see the damage in that as well. But I'm cognizant of it, yeah. So it's like one of my main things, make sure that works. Make sure that works. As in stability, make sure that's there. Make sure they never feel that feeling of, I don't really know where I'm going. Yeah. Mario, look, thanks very much. Okay. Thank you.